So I want to talk about cults. Let's talk about cults today because I think it's vital to understanding the psychology behind formulating them. This term, this word cult, is thrown out all over the place in our present age, and it's chiefly because of the elite's handiwork at creating an extremely divisive type of society. Now, this begs the question, what's the point in having a divided society? I'm glad you asked. There isn't one. There is absolutely no point in having a divided society. It's just a means to an end, right? So in order for a population to be completely subjugated, it must first become fractured due to contrasting ideologies, independent beliefs, and personal ethos. The end result is a kind of a mind-melded, unified society that exists under one banner, adopting one worldview. So the division can be looked at as something that is simply the disruptor. It's the chaos agent that must arrive before there's actually any kind of order or unification. Now, what chaos does is it triggers our innate desire to survive, cultivating the need to protect ourselves against this chaotic threat, whatever this chaos agent is. And our reasoning faculties will end up just taking a back seat as the sympathetic nervous system kicks into overdrive. The only thought, the most important thought, becomes survival. The fear of not surviving, well, this seizes the mind like a bear trap, and the thought becomes completely unshakable. And as long as the chaos exists, as long as the threat exists, the mind and the body will persist in a state of fight or flight mode. But the problem with this, there's a lot of problems with this, but one of the chief problems with this is that when you are in this fight or flight mode, the brain is unable to function in a calm and logical manner. And this ends up at scale producing an entire society of cantankerous people who are looking for threats. And the threats are simply those that do not concede to their own personal worldview. Over the last decade, I've noticed that this country has fallen victim to what is known as labeling psychology, which is essentially an approach in the sociology of deviance that focuses on the ways in which the agents of social control attach stigmatizing stereotypes to particular groups and the ways in which the stigmatized change their behavior once they become labeled. Now, you've seen this play out over the last few years with terms such as Nazi, racist, Hamas sympathizer, misinformationist, conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, racist. We got to say that twice for good measure. White supremacist, election denier, and many, many other labels that have been thrown out. Now, I think these labels, they get developed and pushed throughout the digital airways by big media on behalf of the system, which is ran by the elite, who are manipulated by the powers of spiritual darkness. The goal is to get these terms adopted by the masses as a means of seeding division within humanity. And frankly, it's been working. And why wouldn't it be working? The human lifespan is roughly 80 years? And we've been indoctrinated to forego the lessons of the ancients that come before us. So we really have no clue as to how the world actually operates because truth has been diluted over the centuries due to our pursuit of fake linear progress. Eventually, new labels become adopted to be used as weapons to attack one another. And that's the whole point. Verbal confrontation usually precedes physical confrontation. So while a society may not think that they're at war with each other, yeah, they in fact are at war with each other. It just hasn't escalated to physical violence yet. The psychology behind this and really why it works is because humans don't want to be ostracized from the greater human community. Think about it. This is part of our survival instincts as we're not created to operate alone. We are relational creatures. Humans operate better in groups, moving as packs. We move together as a tight-knit family. And so to be rejected into the wilderness outside of the camp can mean certain death. The wilderness means you're on your own and without the protection, away from the safety and security and benefits of the broader community. In order to be welcomed within the community, well, then it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to fall in line with what the greater community accepts as a way of life. And since we're really just talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, well, whether the accepted way of life is good or bad doesn't really matter. People simply just want to survive. And so labeling psychology is a great way to control a population, because ultimately, once a divisive idea has been seeded, the people will drive the indoctrination and the division amongst themselves. All that is required is for the system to plant the seed, and nobody will be the wiser. In an attempt to stay on the right side of an issue, because, well, to fall on the wrong side of an issue could mean ostracism, people will acquiesce to the labeling propaganda. Again, because nobody wants to be known as a racist or a conspiracy theorist or a nut job, because these people are the pariah of society. This is precisely why you'll see people constantly switching positions on divisive issues. We see this with Hollywood actors, athletes, corporations, politicians, our friends, family members. What you're really witnessing are people that are attempting to survive and hold on to their communal beliefs simply out of fear that they'll be cast out of the camp. Now, here's where things get really complicated. Cults, they operate by a different set of rules. They're generally the antithesis to what can be defined as communal behavior. People who subscribe to ideas that are not the norm and exercise a high level of devotion to these ideas are considered to be people that are living within a cult. However, for those that are within the cult, well, they believe that their worldview is the accurate one, and those that fall within what's considered the norm are the ones who possess a faulty worldview. So yeah, it gets a little confusing. This is why understanding the psychology behind labeling is so important, because humans commonly accept an idea as truth if the majority of people believe it. We have a bias towards consensus, not necessarily towards truth. And why? Because consensus means community. Consensus means greater chance of relationship. Consensus means increased chances of survival by being protected by everyone else in the village. So in order to sway a society, one simply needs to seed an idea that can be taken up by the majority. The community will then ostracize anyone who doesn't acquiesce to the idea. Those that are ostracized will then be labeled as followers of a cult. This is precisely where we are in society today. And we arrived here because as a whole, our society has decided to rest on its bias towards consensus instead of truth. People want to survive. The issue concerning cults cults aren't the problem. The fact that cults exist, they are not problematic in and of themselves. Cults aren't necessarily a bad thing, but you can have really bad ideas that are germane to a cult. The term cult has been stigmatized in our society as a very bad thing, but they don't necessarily have to be. In fact, under the true definition of a cult, the word simply describes a culture that is not normative. The term cult is also part of the labeling psychology game that the elite are playing with its citizens. The word has been stigmatized and adopted as a means to seed further division. It just becomes a vector for hostile identification. Right? Somebody disagrees with you and they fall into another camp and think a specific way that is the antithesis to the way that you think. And you're like, oh, you're in a cult, right? We just use this as a term to beat each other about the head, right? All of this is social programming and also what's known as really social engineering. It's a good example of what this looks like is how the supposed Nazi revolution has been revived in the United States simply due to the existence of a few whack jobs. Like for all we know, it could just be CIA plants because they do this kind of thing, right? But with this revolution comes the revival of the term fascist, a term that I keep hearing over and over again from people that it's evident that they don't even know what this word means, but they keep using it. They keep using it. These are people that are they've been indoctrinated. They are part of the programming. This is a form of pairing. Okay. So let me break this down. Pairing, when it comes to kind of reprogramming someone's mind or getting them to be able to uptake an idea so that they can recall it quickly, right? It includes associating a word with images, and it's highly effective. It's a highly effective technique. Studies have shown that this is incredibly effective as it greatly increases people's ability to recall. So you simply flash a picture of Adolf Hitler Then you flash a picture of the word fascist. Then you finally flash a picture of, say, I don't know, everybody's enemy, Donald Trump. And you've made the connection. That's all you have to do. This is why the media keeps using visuals from the Nazi era. And here's the odd thing. Most people subscribe to the idea that understanding history helps prevent, atrocities, helps us to prevent repeating the same things, the same types of atrocities that have occurred in the past, right? We don't want to repeat these things in the future. Yet in practice, that isn't what we come to know is true, is it? That's not what we see. What appears to be true is that humans continue to create atrocities, often cycling the same ones. I mean, hello, World War I, World War II, and we're on the cusp of World War III. It's like we don't learn. And in our day, history isn't being used to warn or prevent future atrocities. It seems like history is being used as a smokescreen to effectuate more atrocities in the future. Hence, the whole idea of history repeating itself. We're simply like a dog that continues to chase its own tail. Now, how can you know programming is working? Let me show you. This is how you know programming, MK Ultra type programming is actually working. Because when we look at this term fascist, as this is the example, nobody ever looks up what the word means. Okay, I don't want to say nobody. Most people that are using this term, they don't look up what the word means. If they did, they'd realize that it was actually the current administration, Joe Biden administration, that was attempting to create a one-party system against the will of its people by flooding the nation with illegal immigrants and then shipping them all to swing states. They'd also realize that it was the same administration that has been the one that's colluding with big tech and big media in order to sway the opinions of voters. Same administration that shoved the president of the United States into a corner, then installed a puppet that the American people did not vote for as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. It's the current government, the current one, that weaponized the judicial system and went after a former president, a United States citizen who decided to run for re-election. Now, all of this is precisely how a fascist leader would rule in order to keep their power. Yet, people have been trained, programmed to believe Trump is the actual fascist. And it's because word and image association programming is so incredibly effective. Incredibly effective. And it's also because fascism is commonly thought of as a right-wing ideology. So many people don't even recognize the true signs of fascism. So since our current government leans left, a lot of people miss the fact that it's been practicing fascism minus the element of racism. This, my friends, is how a nation slowly ends up under an authoritarian regime without people even knowing that it's happening. By the time that people do recognize that it's happening or that it has happened, it is way too late. So let me give you another example of MK Ultra programming. Right? This is the narrative around the rally that was held in Madison Square Garden. Remember this? This was a whole thing when it came out, all right, some weeks back. People believed that despite the fact that a Jew, a Black American, and an Indian American all delivered speeches at President Trump's rally, it was in fact a Nazi rally. Why? Because a comedian made an ethnic joke, and the mainstream media began to see the idea in everybody's minds that making ethnic jokes equates to being a full-on Nazi or white supremacist. So now we've added more visuals to the term Nazi and fascist. These include people from other ethnicities. Now we've got Black Americans, Indian Americans, right, etc. You can include the Jews, throw them in there as well. I mean, in fact, I saw an Israeli flag that was hanging from the stands at the rally. But so now you have all of this imagery that you can associate, right? This is programming at work. With enough repetition, these ideas take root within the mind and people will accept them as truth within the world. Doesn't matter how ridiculous the idea is. They've been programmed at this point. This is how factions are formed at the hands of the global elite. And the factions will then fight. That's what they'll do. They will fight the elite's wars for them, unbeknownst to them. The elite, however, themselves are just simply puppets in the grand scheme of things. What a lot of people aren't aware of is that there's a spiritual component to all of this. There's an entire spiritual narrative that has been divorced from the human psyche. And I don't mean some abstract, ethereal sense of good versus evil. You know, people like to say, oh yeah, this person is bad. They're a demon, right? There's demons everywhere. And I'm not saying there aren't demons. 100% there are demons, but I don't mean in some sort of ethereal sense where demons are just kind of hanging out, doing some stuff, all right? Just doing bad things because they got nothing else to do, but just do bad things, right? And they're bored. No, I mean, there's a legitimate, organized spiritual assault on humanity that is being executed for a specific purpose. And this purpose goes back thousands of years. We've just all been programmed to forget the broader human story. This is something I'll talk about more in the future. But as for now, just know we're all being meticulously divided and placed on what I would consider a powder keg that's near its time to explode. We've entered a point in history where it seems like there's no facts. No, there's no discussion. There's no argumentation or debating. No, there's only room for attacks and an expectation that you will dissent from your position, ad hominems, right? And a new president can't change the underlying sickness that has seeped into the skin of humanity like a parasite. This, to me, is Big Brother. This is the party. This is George Orwell's 1984 playing out in our faces. This is the conspiracy theory of the past playing out in the present, only for people in the future to be surprised that it actually happened. This is the giants at work. And once our nation stops thinking critically, it will be game over, not only for us, but also for the rest of the world. Now, I will say, however, that I am somewhat hopeful now that the current regime will have its brakes pumped for at least 4 years. Hopeful. I'm hopeful. Please don't take away my hope, y'all. Don't take away my hope. But at the same time, I'm not so disillusioned to think that we're completely out of the woods. I mean, we're currently close to WW3, right? World War III. We're knocking at the door at this point in time. And on top of that, there were 2 assassination attempts made on the life of Donald Trump. And people within our society have become way more unhinged due to him winning. So I imagine the elite that are working in the shadows will continue to make his life hell in order to forward their agenda of creating an enslaved global society. So be aware of the programming because many people won't be able to recognize it, let alone fight against it. So until the next time, remember, giants are real. Godspeed.